You are listening to Proof Text, a GlossaHouse podcast exploring scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Fredrick J. Long. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text. I'm Michael Halcomb and I'm here with Fred Long, and in this GrammarPoint episode we're continuing to talk about pronouns, and Fred's been sort of leading us in a series on this. So Fred, what pronouns are we talking about in this episode?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about one type called the interrogative pronoun. Now, the interrogative pronoun is tis, and tis is the masculine and feminine form. And then it has the neuter form t, tis and t, and then it uses third declension ending. So tis becomes tenos, tena, tini, tena, and then the plural tenes, tenon, tc, and tenas. So that's for the masculine.
So when you say tis, you're meaning teeth?
Yeah,
like with the iota.
Iota.
All right.
So teeth and t. So the neuter is going to be similar, except when you have neuter, nominative, and accusative, those forms are the same, t and t, right. And then the plural is tena, tena. Now, there's another pronoun that looks identical and has the same forms, and that's called the indefinite pronoun. And so then the question is, well, how do you differentiate those? In the Greek text that we have, they're differentiated by an accent mark. The interrogative pronoun will show the accent mark on the iota. Now, sometimes the indefinite pronoun will have an accent, but it will never be on the iota. So it often doesn't have an accent, and if it does, it's not on the iota. Whereas the interrogative pronoun always has an accent, and that accent is always on the iota. And so that can be the sign of a question. So an interrogative pronoun is one that's used for asking a direct question. Who stole my Lego, or who stole my ego? And it could also be used for indirect questions. For example, she said that he stole my ego. Or she said she was wondering who it was that stole her ego. That would be an example of an indirect question. So direct question will use, in English, a punctuation of a question mark at the end. An indirect question is just assuming that question as being asked, but it's someone's thinking about it or reporting that someone had asked a question. So these interrogative pronouns mark question asking, whether it's a direct question in the discourse or an indirect one. Now, these questions are significant because often they invite the reader to consider the answer. So in terms of a prominence effect, when someone's asking questions, it's engaging the audience. It's pulling them out. It's pulling them in to consider something. And so rhetorically, they're significant. And there's different types of questions. And that's another kind of topic of what types of questions can be asked. But so the interrogative question, in brief, uses third declension endings, has accents over the iota, and draws people into a discussion by way of asking questions. Now we see Paul doing this in like Romans. He'll say, well, what then? Or why did this happen? And this is obviously like an attention-getting kind of device. And so, those are, questions are used rhetorically. Where's the wise man? Where's the rhetorician of the world, or these kinds of things. So questions are important parts of the discourse, and one clue to seeing them and finding them is the presence of these interrogative pronouns.
Yeah. in conversational circles, I mean, it's one of the first things that we sort of learn. Tionamasu, right?
What is your name?
What's your name? And everyone learns that early on.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's good. Those the TETs can be confusing early on, but knowing the tonos, the accent mark, how to identify what it's doing when it's absent or present. Yeah, it's a helpful tip.
Yeah. Now, you don't need the interrogative pronoun to ask questions in Greek.
Right.
You don't need them. You can have all kinds of questions without them. But when they're there, they do mark a question. And I think, again, they're attention-getting device. So in Ephesians 1, for example, Paul's praying, I pray that you would know, what is the riches of his glory, what is the wealth of his inheritance, what is, blah, blah, blah. He says, I want you to know what these things are. It's interesting that these are indirect questions, and he doesn't need to state it that way. He could have said, I want you to know God's wealth for you, or the wealth of his inheritance, the extent of his glory, the wonderfulness of his power, the greatness of his power. But Paul doesn't state it that way. He says, I want you to know what they are, what it is, and that ramps up the prominence by stating it that way.
Yeah. And not asking, not using interrogatives. I was thinking another phrase like "kalosi," right? Are you well? Right? You don't need the interrogative there to say like "posechis," how are you doing? Just "kalosi," are you well?
So
"evechis."
So this example I gave you is from Ephesians 1:18 to 19. So 1:18 to 19 has these three indirect questions that Paul didn't need to use as indirect questions. And
Yeah. Well, good. I think that's helpful. Thanks for imparting some wisdom, and thank you guys for watching and listening. We hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? GlossaHouse can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, GlossaHouse offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. GlossaHouse.